Without Reservations by J.W. Marriott Jr. So this book was fascinating. I've always been interested in Marriott, and I'm really excited that I actually had the opportunity to read this book written by J.W. Marriott Jr. It is amazing how his family has gone through the Depression and war, and they are now this multi-billion-dollar company, just starting from an A&W root beer stand. His parents pulled together $3,000 for this little A&W root beer stand, and now Marriott has grown into the corporation it is today. J.W. Marriott Jr.'s parents, of course, started this right before he was born. He was born in 1932. They opened their first stand in 1927. From the A&W root beer shops, his family restaurant chain grew into Hot Shops, which was one of the first drive-thrus on the east of the Mississippi. The Hot Shops then went in airports and airline catering, and as his father got older and the chains expanded throughout the country, J.W. Marriott Jr.'s passion has always been hotels. So at that point, they decided to go into hotels. They opened their very first Marriott in Warsaw. This property has now led to their most profitable property in New York, which is the Marriott Marquis. They have various brands, from moderate pricing at Marriott's Courtyard all the way up to the Ritz-Carlton, which is their luxury brand, which he says was the quickest decision he's ever made to acquire Ritz-Carlton and enter into the luxury hotel chain. Marriott's business structure is phenomenal. Their culture is just out of this world, and so many companies follow their structure, especially their culture. They have various success measures in place to have that customer loyalty, profitability, and growth. Of course, customer loyalty always leads to profitability and, of course, company growth. J.W. Marriott Jr. doesn't care how phenomenal he is with numbers. If you are a GM at one of Marriott's properties and your employees are not happy, they're scared of you, they're timid, they don't feel comfortable, they don't seem happy, J.W. Marriott Jr. will let that manager go. He wants his employees happy. That is his number one priority, which is amazing. Very, very caring company, all the way from the top down. He feels that if you take care of your employees, they'll take care of you, which in return they take care of your customers, which again leads back to that loyalty. On the business side, they went from managing and owning hotels to now just managing, franchising, and only owning a select number of hotels. This was due to the mounds of debt that they found themselves in the early 1990s. This mound of debt led them to going into business agreements with investors and property owners, and they now have long-term management contracts with them or franchises, which has led them to their success. One of J.W. Marriott Jr.'s decision-making rules is to follow your heart. This one I found the most interesting because I find myself using this decision-making method on a day-to-day basis in my career. As a fellow hotelier, I love this industry, and sometimes you are put in positions where you do have to follow your heart, and not on an emotional side. Just as J.W. Marriott Jr. says in his book, that it isn't based on emotion, it's based on your experience. When you're using the decision-making rule of following your heart, you're following your experience. You're letting your experience do the talking. That's helping you make that decision. And ultimately, he found himself in a position to acquire Disney. And at the time, he researched for years. He had people on property and was trying to figure out if this was the right place and right time for them to acquire Disney. This was, shortly after Walt Disney's death in the mid-60s, and Disneyland was booming. At this time, he realized that Disney would not reach their potential if he were to acquire them. And they would also have to borrow $2.5 billion to make this happen. Even looking back now, he even says he made the right decision by following his heart, because Disney would not reach where they are today if his company were to acquire them back then. After his many years in this industry and the tremendous success that he has had with his company and his children and his children's entrepreneurships, he has found himself at a time where he needs to step down. This has followed several heart attacks, um, long, lengthy recovery times, of course, stress to his wife and family. So he now has stepped down as CEO, but is still an executive chairman on the board of Marriott. He has passed the torch over to Arne Sorensen, who has been with Marriott for quite some time now, and he felt was the best choice as CEO, even over his son, who is one of the CFOs of the company. Now that he's retired, he plans on spending as much time with his family as he possibly can, his children, grandchildren, and even great-grandchildren, and especially his wife Donna, who he has been with for over 50 years. Now that he's retired, he stated that he will be visiting properties still, checking up, making sure that everything is still running smoothly, as well as spending time in his favorite Marriott in southern Florida. His company still gives back to the communities where they build their hotels, from donating millions of dollars to save the rainforests in Brazil, Habitats of Humanity, or even helping locals with disabilities find jobs. This is something that is true to his heart and which he still is involved in to this day, even though he is retired as CEO of Marriott. It was so wonderful to see the Marriott through his eyes and the success and the struggle that he went through to make it to where they are today. Marriott's success is forever in J.W. Marriott Jr.'s hands. He has set the company up for success. He set Arne Sorensen up for success, his son up for success, as well as the rest of his children who are on their own adventures. Marriott will forever be known for their wonderful caring culture, their wonderful guest experience, and the loyalty is just a sign of that. This was a wonderful book to read, and I'm so happy I got to read it, especially for a project. I hope you enjoyed. Have a great summer.